This week, we welcome Jessica Johnson and Amber Pedroncelli to discuss Hacker Halted and the Global Cecil Forum. But first, in the Leadership and Communications segment, 3 traits of successful entrepreneurs, 4 ways to gain power and use it for good, 5 reasons to never compromise on punctuality, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. These days, it's rarely a case of if you'll be hacked and more of a question of when. Once the attacker has passed your defenses, they cover their tracks and systematically infiltrate your network to steal information or shut your business down. You need to rethink the way security is delivered for your digitally transformed business. And there's one security solution that delivers it all, NetScout. Get visibility without borders for consistent detection, mitigation, and prevention across any network, data center, cloud, 5G, and more. Learn more at securityweekly.com/NetScout. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 140, recorded August 19th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. Joining me from G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island is my co-host, Paul Asadorian. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, good to be here, Matt.
And this week, joining us remotely is Jason Albuquerque because he's got too much work to do.
How we doing? From Carousel headquarters in Exeter, Rhode Island. About 30 minutes up the road from G-Unit.
Yeah, he sent an email this morning saying, all right, my afternoon's pretty busy. Can I dial in remote? I'm like, of course, I do all the time.
Right.
You know, I'm still feeling the effects of being gone at Black Hat and DEF CON, and it's just, you know, one of those things. They pile up, so.
Yep, I get it. And Paul's back with us this week, so we're all good.
Yay.
We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register for one of our upcoming webcasts with Zane Lackey of Signal Sciences or Ian McShane from Endgame, or both, by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. So many of the big East Coast cybersecurity trade shows take place in crowded cities like Boston and New York, where parking is a nightmare and it will cost you an arm and a leg. However, this year's Compass Security Symposium is being held at Twin River Casino in Lincoln, Rhode Island, just 15 minutes outside of Providence. The venue has plenty of free and easy parking. Speakers will include social engineering expert Chris Hadnagi and our very own Security Weekly podcast founder, Paul Asadorian. Use the discount code SW2019 to save $20 on your registration. All right, we flipped the order this week, boys. So we're doing leadership articles first, then Jessica and Amber will join us for the second segment. All right, so let's get started on these articles. Yeah, so we talked a few weeks back, and we talk about leadership characteristics kind of often on the show. And we'd done a segment on leadership characteristics, and then this article popped up, and I said, all right, I don't want to cover this article because it talks about the 3 traits of successful entrepreneurs. And I read this article and I said, are these really traits, or are these more styles, kind of like leadership styles than traits? Because we've talked traits before. These to me aren't traits. These are more like kind of your leadership style almost versus a trait. But I'm curious what you guys thought.
And I almost look at it as a spirit, right? There are leaders who have that entrepreneurial spirit and kind of that base within them where they always want to be innovating and taking risks. But there are leaders who don't have that entrepreneurial spirit, right? So it's a style, it's maybe a personality characteristic, things like that.
Well, I think you said it, Jason. I think leaders have to have a personality, and usually, I don't want to put it in any given category. Like Matt, you said, like, these are different styles, but I think you have leadership qualities and a personality that lends itself to being, in general, eccentric, quirky, kind of weird. You stand out, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice it and dice it. To say, like, you've got some of these traits is kind of doing it a disservice. I think there's a lot of different traits that leaders have. And my son, who's 11, is doing a book report on Steve Jobs. And so my wife picked that one for him so I could help him with it, which I sometimes give him way too much information. But in any case, I'm helping him with the slide presentation and all that stuff. And we're watching the movie Pirates of Silicon Valley. If you've never watched that movie, it's one of the greatest documentary films about the history of technology. It's an actual movie, not just a documentary. But in there, my kids are watching it, and Bill Gates is with Ballmer at the strip club, and there's and Steve Jobs is like doing hits of acid and things like so. There was a lot of education that he wasn't probably, and neither of us really expecting in watching that. But I think it helps tell the story when we look at those two figures in even just a history of technology, just how kind of like quirky and eccentric they were in their own ways, and you see that in the movie. They're very, very different, right? They talk about Steve's diet, how he only eats fruit, and he's going to these, things where he's chanting, right? And Gates is just like the nerdy person that's sleeping on the couch with the world's dirtiest T-shirt and likes to drive cars really fast and all that. And so it's a good lesson for my son that, some people that start companies like Dad are kind of weird, really.
Yeah, and that's why when I looked at this list, I'm like, all right, there are some genius leaders out there.
I mean, for sure.
Gates and Jobs are probably two that come to mind, and there's others. I mean, Elon Musk. These guys are geniuses.
Well, and geniuses in their own right. Like Jobs was a genius in one respect with his vision. I'll use that as an all-encompassing term. And you see in the movie, you see Woz is a genius with technology and that sort of thing. And so they're just geniuses in different ways even.
Exactly. Yeah. And not everybody's going to be like that.
Right.
No, and in many ways they needed each other, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you kind of needed that visionary spirit who was a genius at, setting goals and creating the vision. But without that technical genius, they wouldn't have been successful, right? So you need that balance.
And that's why I think this article is so interesting is I don't expect to see this in one particular person. But what I think this does is really understand when you look at a leadership team or you look at a founding team, you're going to see these traits in some of your leaders, right? You're going to need that genius to offset the heart of a champion, to offset the guy that just bold and wants to disrupt, right? It is the way this article describes it. It's not going to come from one person, but there's going to be a balance across these three. I think when you look at a founding team and you look at the executive leadership of teams, these are characteristics you're going to see across the team, I think.
It's really funny, and I was dying laughing. I hadn't seen the movie Pirates of Silicon Valley in some time, and to speak to what Matt's saying, Ballmer's Ballmer, right? His personality is very different from Gates. Gates and Allen in the beginning, especially, like they're the nerds and they're working on code on the, had to explain with the typing machine. It wasn't cars, but it was actually a ticker tape that they were writing code on. And it's like, spring break or whatever in Harvard, and Ballmer's in the background going, I got these girls in my room and they're naked. And I told them that you were writing code, and they got really excited. And they were like, oh, Fortran. And I'm like on the floor, like laughing. Right? But it shows those like very different personalities when you start a company. So,
yeah, definitely.
Definitely go back and watch that movie. I hadn't seen it in a while.
Yeah, I'll have to. That's a good lead into article number 2, which is miserable leaders spread misery.
It's true. Anyone in well, not just the leader especially, but as you guys and most of our audience knows, right? Anyone spreading misery in the organization can be like a virus that can just spread like wildfire.
Toxic.
Yep.
Absolutely toxic. There's that old saying in baseball, right? In the clubhouse, you have the cancer in the clubhouse.
Yep.
You could have the most talented person, the highest salaried person in that clubhouse, and if their personality is toxic, it just creates an entire toxicity across that entire team, right? So leaders need to lead by example, right? And they can't be somber, they can't be unhappy with their teams.
They can't be missing their flights home from
showing
Vegas.
Interest.
They can't be missing their flights home from Vegas. They have to set good examples, Jason, is what I mean.
They can. That's my last article on punctuality, Paul.
Okay.
It's not
I should read that one.
We'll get there, Paul. We'll get there.
But I have worked with miserable leaders, and I can tell you it is super toxic, right? I think the best line in this article is enjoy leading or get out of leadership.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
very true. Yep. Some people just do not. In different types of leadership, right? Some people, especially when you start a company, right, might be miserable or just plain out like not really good at doing certain things. And we've talked before about hiring for your deficiencies. Same thing.
Yep.
This definitely fits into that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the article goes through this misconception of if you're a leader, you have to put on that stoic type personality and almost to the level of being somber. And that's just untrue, right? Because what that's going to do is just going to permeate across the entire team.
Right.
And one of the lines that I liked was actually at the end, and they called it the self-assessment. And it said, would your team be surprised if you smiled or laughed during a meeting? If the answer is yes, then you're a downer. Stop spreading misery. I mean, that was just the perfect line to kind of do a gut check.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, it's hard enough to attract talent, keep talent. You have a leader like this that just it makes it so not exciting to be working there. Guess what?
Absolutely.
You're going to have a lot of turnover. And I think some other leaders that don't realize how bad the situation can get until they start to see it. Sometimes it's too late. It's very toxic.
Well, that's true when you hire people too.
At the end of the day, it's don't let your team be happy in spite of you, right? I mean, it's one of those scenarios where you want them to be happy because of you, right? Be happy to come to work, be able to have that work-life balance, be that leader that they have respect for and they can come to. And if you're just in a miserable workplace or work-life balance, you're not going to get the productivity you need out of your team.
Well, and I think that people you hire have to share that same level of passion and enthusiasm too.
Absolutely. Otherwise, the culture clash will never allow you to be productive as an organization. Those have to align. And having that passion, both at the leadership level and the employee level, is where you're going to see a lot of success and a lot of innovation moving forward. And you taint that culture either way. Look out.
Yep.
Agreed.
All right, Jason, this one was yours. 4 ways to gain power and use it for good.
Yeah, so I like this article because, number one, people can take the word power and it evokes a reaction. It says it right in the article, right? And out of the gate, people will take power and equate it to either a negative or a positive, right? So you can take the word power and say, do you look at it like iron fist, or does it make you nervous, or do you think of an org chart? Or do you take the word power and spin it into something positive, like emboldening and inciting and driving energy and influence throughout an organization? And I did a gut check for myself on this, and I said, you know what? For me, power is more about positive impacts, influencing the organization to get positive goals accomplished, and really, helping my organization and any organization I'm with succeed and hit certain outcomes that we're looking for. So it's just an interesting dynamic of when you look at the word power, how you can think both sides of the aisle, right? And it goes through a book that was written by a UC Berkeley professor, and there's principles around this to take it and actually make it positive.
Yeah, and I thought what was interesting is not only when you get power, but enduring power. The ability to kind of keep that power means that you're focusing on others. And it breaks down kind of these 4 different categories of how enduring power actually comes from that focus onto other people, right? Empathy, which we've talked about on the show before, giving back in the giving aspects, talks about expressing gratitude, being thankful and and expressing that. And then the last one, which I thought was really interesting, was telling stories that unite, which I think is also a really good leadership skill that we've talked about in the past, is that, if you can share through stories and stories that unite, that also allows you to keep that enduring power when you think about you as a leader and your employees that are working for you.
Yeah, I agreed. And I love the theme of this that, that the book, The Power Paradox, actually puts forward and says, define power as a capacity to make a difference in the world, right? Number one, if you go out there with the thought process that anything I do, any type of influence that I can create, any type of trust that I can create, I'm going to do good with it. And I'm going to use these 4 traits to make sure we're always pushing toward success. As an organization or as a team or wherever it may be, I just think it's a great beacon that you can always go toward.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of power behind telling a story, ironically enough, right?
Yeah. To
your team all the time. It has a positive impact in so many ways, provided it's appropriate.
Absolutely.
Or inappropriate, whatever the time calls for. Tell the story, right?
Right. Stories help bring reality into what you're kind of talking about, right? And bringing in stories, bringing in the fact components to kind of support your topic or what you're trying to achieve is a really great way to unify things. And I like to tell, whenever I go up and do a keynote or doing a presentation, I try to use stories to tie in to the overall message, because it relates to the people. Then they can understand it through stories.
Absolutely. And it builds relationships. It shows that there's a human factor to you as a leader. It shows that you're willing to share with your staff, your organization, or the people that you're telling the story to. So it even opens up a level of vulnerability, right? Because you could be telling a story about something that wasn't successful. And that has a huge impact on teams and folks that you're speaking to as well.
Oh, yeah, I have plenty of those.
I try and start my talks with a story and relate it to the topic. And, that accomplishes so many things when you're giving a talk. One, you have to be mindful of time, too. And sometimes it doesn't always work its way in. But when I do build the time for that story in, it ties into why I'm delivering this content, right? What was the story, the challenge, the success or the failure, and the story around that led to me up here on stage disseminating this information, right? Why I put the work into putting the presentation together. It also does a great job of relating you to your audience, right? That you're a real person, you can tell a story, you make people laugh, right? And you engage with people, you include some kind of, like, if it's a story about your kids, like how many people here have kids, right? Of course, a lot of people are going to raise their hands, but they're, how many people have kids that like to play practical jokes on you, right? and then tell the story and relate it back to your talk. I forget who was Michael Santarcangelo and Jason Blanchard that were talking about how to do that in their own very different ways. It led to me ultimately doing that, and I think it's a great thing to bring to your leadership team as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, and like I said, I got plenty of failure stories
right?
That kind of help. Yeah, look, every step of the way. Exactly. Helps you learn. You learn from those mistakes, and hopefully you don't repeat them, and you end up in a better place somewhere. So, whether it's a successful or a failure, those stories still have meaning and purpose, and help educate people on. Not everybody went from A to Z in a straight line. Some of us went really sideways along the way.
It's true.
This next article is the 4th in our series of 5 on trust. And this is a really interesting article because of what I think we're going through right now in this concept of digital transformation. And this is when innovation and trust are at odds. And the story starts with, I forgot the name of the company. Hold on. Oh, Fisher-Price. And one of their early innovations around the little sleep chair that sold really successfully, but also was tied to a lot of infant deaths and created some issues for Fisher-Price and trust and other things. And what I thought was interesting is the article gets into this concept of manic innovation and how manic innovation can actually be pretty bad for an organization because it forces you to do things that you wouldn't do naturally. You're trying to accelerate innovation, and sometimes you don't put the right kind of risk framework requirements in place, and you're taking the risk that you would normally do as part of the innovation process, and maybe you're transferring some of that risk to consumers. And if I step back and think about where we are from a digital transformation perspective, and we think about this need to constantly innovate, the question is, are we actually doing manic innovation right now in this time frame? And is that putting more of a risk on the consumer in this environment? And if I think about things like mobile banking apps and other things that could potentially be used as attack surfaces for compromising people's accounts or data, we might be. And I thought this was a really good article to kind of get us to level set sometimes as organizations, say, wait, are we moving too fast? Should we slow down? Are we learning from others that have attempted to do this in the past? Are we doing it right? And that's the kind of conversation I wanted to talk to you two about.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling toward this is we're kind of in this strange perfect storm, right? We live in this instant gratification society that wants and needs rapid innovation. We want everything we want now. We want it yesterday. So now, the market's out there trying to compete with that and say we need to roll out innovations at, more rapidly than we have ever in the past. Now we're skipping steps, right? We're not looking at risk or taking a deeper dive into the level of risk it's going to bring to the organization or our clients. And by doing that, we're doing a disservice to the people we're serving because we're not putting in that diligence that we normally would for the sake of speed to market.
Exactly. And I think this creates cultural issues, right? If you think about a well-established company that's been in business for 90 years and you're trying to skip steps to innovate, what's that doing to the culture? What's that doing to your risk profile? What's that doing to the ultimate trust that you've established over the past 90 years? Are you really jeopardizing all of that for the sake of one innovation? But I think there are companies out there that are rapidly going after this and maybe not thinking about some of these other components.
Yeah, that rush to market can, and I'm sure you could come up with lots of examples, can cause issues with ethics and values as you rush to market, obviously, right? And that can be an issue for some companies, which can then in turn erode trust, which can be gained back depending on the situation.
Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. I mean, the other example right now is the stories last week on Boeing, and is the 737 MAX. The ultimate destruction for Boeing as a company. That's how bad it's gotten.
Right.
That's how much lack of trust they have right now. There's so many issues with that plane. Is this the beginning of the end for Boeing? I mean, that's how bad this potentially could be.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Boeing as one of those, I always viewed them as one of the untouchable organizations, right? Nothing's ever going to put Boeing out of business, but look at what's happening, right?
I'm sure they thought the same thing, Jason.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Which that can lead to an erosion of the organization. Xerox is the shining example of that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thus, this article was very timely, I think, for me. In a lot of the conversations we have with organizations as we see this stuff going on is, are we getting too far ahead of ourselves to try to keep up from an innovative perspective? And we're willing to throw away our culture. We're willing to throw away the trust we've established, all for the sake of the next big innovation. I don't know that it's worth it, but there are examples.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, you're tossing away the quality of your service or your product. You're tossing away the diligence you would provide to make sure that your clients, your customers are safe. For that next big fast innovation that you could put out there to market. I mean, I don't know. There's so many different pieces to this that play. There's a level of greed. There's a level of wanting to beat the competition. I mean, there's so many factors here that play into this. But we're eroding our cultures within organizations to just think about go to market as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, and as leaders, I think we have to resist sometimes. To the right point. I mean, look, we know the challenges security folks have had over the years is the Department of No. I'm not saying that, but I do want leaders to really step back sometimes and think about, are we skipping steps? Are we jeopardizing the trust relationship we have with consumers? Should we slow it down a little bit? I just want people to think about it and see if they're doing the right things at the right time. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Paul, this last article is for you. 5 reasons to not jeopardize punctuality. My wife and I are at odds on this one all the time because I'd rather show up. And you guys might be too, right? I'd rather be 15 minutes early than a minute late.
My wife hates being
100%.
Hates being early. I can't stand being early.
From my perspective, being in the Marine Corps for 8 years, if you're 10 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. That was the mantra, right?
Yeah.
So for a Marine, it's be there 15 minutes early. That way you're prepped and ready to go when the time hits.
Yep.
Yeah. So I believe in punctuality, and this gives you 5 reasons why you should really think about it. 1, it shows you're committed. I think that's a good thing, right? You go into a job interview and you show up late.
Yeah.
That's not showing a level of commitment, right? So what do you think that's going to demonstrate to the company that's interviewing you if you show up late? Are you really committed? You'll never miss anything, Paul.
Oops.
Like an airplane.
Fortunately for me, it was a quick recovery and actually a better flight I got booked on, and it saved us $5.
A whole $5.
All right.
Well,
someone was looking out for me that day. I mean, maybe not early in the morning, and then when they woke up, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna look out for Paul," and I just got lucky and got a later flight home that was $5 cheaper and a better flight. The tiki gods were on my side, Johnny says.
Yeah, but he hasn't seen the bill from the driver who sat and waited for him an hour and a half to get him to the airport.
I mean, details,
Oh gosh. Number 3.
I think one of the pieces in here too is that if you're already in an organization and you're creating this habit of being late all the time, and I've seen this happen, it actually starts playing on the motivation of the rest of the team, right? They start saying, "Hey, why can he always be late?
Right.
I'm going to always be late because boss doesn't take it seriously. He doesn't care. So we'll all come in late, right?" And then that respect factor as a leader starts getting eroded.
I'll admit, sometimes I tell my wife, like, "Look, I know you could use like 5 or 10 minutes more of my help. I got to go. I can't be late. Got to set a good example, right?" That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree. And then, it talks about earning more respect, which I think is true, right? If you're there, you're respecting the other person's time that's meeting you because you're on time. You're not late. You're not wasting their time. That's a respect thing. And a lot of it is, it's better and less stressful for you too if you stay on time and on track. I mean, that's why I live by my calendar. Without my calendar, I have no idea what's going on. But the reason I leverage the calendar is because I want to be on time. I want to be punctual, and the calendar helps force me to be on time.
See, if I'm going to be late, I'm just going to miss the whole thing and rebook and then show up on time for that one. And just be like, I don't know what happened to my calendar. Kind of like I did today with my 11:45. Sorry.
And I'll say, just from experience as a leader, it's an easy conversation to have, right? It's easy to sit down with someone who's creating that habit and say, "Hey, listen, here are the unintended consequences of you being late all the time and not being punctual for meetings, not coming to work and coming into work on time. Here's what it's doing to the team. Here's what it's doing to other individuals in the organization. Here's what other leaders are saying, right? And now it's affecting our brand as a department." And once you have that conversation, it clicks many times.
Well, and you also have to realize that no one's perfect. Like I missed a meeting today, and I do apologize. But be honest about that's my whole thing. Like I understand, like stuff happens, stuck in traffic, or you just forgot, right? Like, but whatever it is, just be honest about it. Like, don't try and lie. You know what I mean? Like,
and Paul, honestly,
I missed it. It was my fault. It was my mistake. I apologize. Let's reschedule and move on. Right? It happens.
Yeah, and that's exactly why every time I've been saying it in the pretense of habitual, right? Once it becomes habitual, then it's an issue. Everybody has issues. Everybody forgets to set an alarm. Everybody gets stuck in traffic. Stuff happens. But when it becomes a habitual thing, then it needs to be addressed.
When you're starting the meeting and you're like, yep, that person's always late, so let's just get started. That's when it's become a habit, and it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right,
then
right.
You know.
Or because they're a key stakeholder, you have to sit there and wait for them to show up because they're the key piece to that meeting for that meeting to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I literally, there was a point in my career where I had a team full of leaders in a meeting, and we were waiting on someone that was a key stakeholder, and all I did was write the number of how much it cost us on the whiteboard for that hour of waiting for someone, and I walked out, and I just left that number
Nice.
right up on the board. And then had the conversation later, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's, we have to respect others' time. We're all busy. And there's a level of respect that for others that you're bringing to the table by showing up on time.
Yeah. And that's why I leverage my calendar and technology to help me stay on time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes Paul's reminders don't go off on his Linux device.
I need to do a system upgrade on that. That's what's holding it back. I don't want to take the hit on productivity when I do that. So
I know.
I got to do it, though. I got to bite the bullet.
All right, gentlemen, that was a great discussion. We're going to take a quick break and then welcome Jessica and Amber to discuss Hacker Halted and the Global CISO Forum.